My first lesson in the basics of safely using psychic powers should be happening soon. It was kind of exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. I was wondering if I had talked too much in my session with Inquisitor Thaberus when someone knocked on the door of the meeting room. It opened and Acolyte Herlindia entered. "Lady SYRINE," she bowed, "the psychers you have requested to have a word with have arrived." "Psychers? More than one person?" "No matter, I might even get more advice." "Thank you, Miss Herlindia, please let them in," I replied while trying my best to be courteous, and caught her subtle expression of being surprised first, followed by a faint smile. Was she astounded by the fact I remembered her name? Having the photographic memory of a Primarch really helps in scoring easy social points. Due to all the happenings, it felt like a lifetime ago when she introduced herself meekly back in the inner sanctum. Herlindia bowed again and left. After that, two newcomers entered the meeting room. Without even looking at them, I knew they were psychers because even without going psychically active myself, somehow unseen energies could be felt whirling around them. Not only were they psychers, but these two were also in a different league compared to Aradus the astropath. A man and a woman stood near the entrance and were looking at me. Both of them had similar pale skin and attire, wearing the psycho robe with extra carapace chest and shoulder armor pieces. The man was carrying a thin staff, whereas the woman had a small psychic hood-like structure behind her collar. "Well, come in," I said while standing up and greeting them with a light bow. The man and woman nodded. Together they walked towards my table, slightly bowed, and proceeded to sit on the empty chairs available. "Greetings, I am SYRINE Fulton Merdini," the man replied with a soft voice. "This is my colleague Sali Henard. We are sanctioned psychers in the service of the Holy Inquisition, currently assigned to Inquisitor Thorn." A swift Analytica confirmed both their human and psycho status as I took a closer look at them. They both appeared to be in their late 30s. The man was slightly below average height, had short white hair and a face that could say to be uneasy. He gave off the aura of a tamed beast, controlled but dangerous. The woman was half a head taller than the man. Beneath an average-looking face was her unkempt waist-length blonde hair that hung lazily in front of her psycho robe. The one common trait of appearance they shared was their hollow-looking eyes. My best description of their overall impression would be unhinged battle psychers. While this might be just me stereotyping, these two definitely reinforced the notion of why normal people would be uneasy near psychers. "Inquisitor Thorn mentioned you would like our advice." "Well, we are here," Fulton said, then stopped talking, looking at me with his unnerving gaze. Truth be told, I was not exactly feeling easy talking with them, but I had a much greater fear of being possessed by a demon, or worse, being turned into a chaos spawn down the road. The very notion that such a possibility existed sent ice-cold chills down my spine, so despite my trepidation, if I ever had to rely on psychic powers, I had to consult the real professionals. Plus suddenly a female voice was heard communicating telepathically. "Plus I got nothing. Plus," replied a male voice. Looking at them, I realized they were chatting through telepathy. "Did Inquisitor Thorn mention anything to you about me?" I asked. Fulton shrugged and Zali answered with her hoarse voice, "We were bedridden for days after arriving at this accursed system and just got better recently." "I see. Well, I would like you two to brief me on the perils of the warp and teach me the knowledge of self-protection when using psychic powers." Fulton's eyes narrowed upon hearing my request. "Plus, what is the deal with her?" Plus Zali asked in telepathy. Plus, "No idea. I will probe and see. Plus, wait, Thorn introduced her. Is that wise?" Plus, I then felt the slightest sensation of being probed, but it quickly fizzled out. "Huh?" Fulton seemed startled, but his timing was so good, without knowing better it would be as if he was reacting to my request. Zali shot him a glance, sighed, sent telepathically, "Plus Fulty, don't be rude. Plus she resisted my probe. Plus wait, what? Are you getting rusty? Plus like hell I'm. Plus please, will you accept my request?" Being probed without permission should have been considered egregious conduct on his part, but I decided to let his actions slide for now. Zali replied this time, "Who are you and why do you need such knowledge?" "Well, I too am a psyker," I began explaining before being interrupted by Fulton. "Ha. You? A psyker? I'm sorry, little lady, being requested by Inquisitor Thorn to meet with you is one thing, what you asked of us is off limits." He then stood up, approached me with an imposing stance, pressing his face close to mine and spoke, "I don't know who you are nor do I care, but we sanctioned psychers do not indulge with the make-believe of the privileged, especially when it concerns matters dealing with the warp. Do you think this is a game? One wrong move here and you with your entire whatever noble family lineage on this little god emperor forsaken rock can be wiped out without a trace. Do you hear me? Plus Sali, I will probe again, aid me. Plus Fulton was apparently not satisfied with the previous attempt. Judging from what I just heard, she can buff him? Is this some sort of psychic quiet technique? Interested in their technique, I shut up and just kept observing them. Plus she went quiet, very suspicious. Plus very well, let's go. Plus. For a brief instant, I felt their powers connected and Fulton tried probing me again with greater intensity, but again it fizzled out. Plus I got nothing. This is not normal. Plus Fulton declared. Now that I saw their technique, I decided to show them my psychic active state to end this charade. Please, I know this is not normal, but I am a psyker. Let me show you. Psychana Activa, activated. The now familiar trippy sensation took over me again. As expected, the two of them had a much stronger psychic resonance than Aradus in my active state. I could even detect a small linkage of their powers, that must have been the result of years of working together. Plus, do you get it now, Fulty? Plus I joined the telepathic conversation. Both of them were stunned, especially Fulton, who was very close to me and had this derpy look on his face. In the next second suddenly things took a dive as I sensed warp energies gathering around Fulton. Alarms in my head sounded as my thought acceleration activated automatically. Wait, is he trying to smite me? Smite was a generic psychic power in this universe in which the psyker unleashed the power of the warp in the form of otherworldly lighting energy to electrocute their enemies. I could see in slow motion the power gathering on the psyker as he charged up for what could be a fatal attack. Fulton. Zali called out to stop her companion, but the latter seemed lost in the motion. I needed to stop this from developing into a disaster and suddenly recalled that the warp energies seemed to respond to my will when I was psychically active. Standing up, I instinctively willed myself to disperse the energy gathering around Fulton. Reacting to my directive, the gathering storm dissipated like light smoke hit by a strong wind. Surprised, like me, by my successful denial of his powers, Fulton now had an even derpier look on his face as panic started to take over him, flipping my previous impressions of the psyker being the cool kid in class sort of person. Not wanting to risk another psychic attack, I put strength into my words and felt my inner might radiate outwards as I delivered a serious warning to Fulton. Mr. Murdini, stop. Something tangible burst forth from me. It even flipped the teacup on the table as my words echoed in the room, and what followed was dead silence. Fulton had fallen back and sat on the floor. Both psychers went still, looking at me like deers staring into headlights. Well, that was effective, but why are they looking so afraid? Looking closer at them, my transhuman eyesight picked up my own reflection on their irises. It would seem like my halo was leaking out and it petrified them. Hold on, why is my halo active now? I quickly looked into my status and found out it was actually part of the feature in Regalis, which became available when becoming psychically active. I must have missed that the first time, as it was quickly dismissed after witnessing that terrible war vision. Please, my colleague was spooked. Zali found her voice and placed herself between me and Fulton. It was at this moment I caught more details from my reflection on the spilt decaf on the table. My halo looked and felt slightly different from the first time it manifested. It was more pronounced and had more weight to it. Looking closer at the reflection, I could even see the edges of it had a hint of red tint with an edgier outer glow. I guessed in my desperation to stop Fulton my halo must have been cranked up to the maximum level. They each held up a hand as if blocking rays from the sun while holding hands with their free hand. Fulton was even hyperventilating. Am I being oppressive here in my current state? I am sorry. I apologized while deactivating my halo. Their relieved faces told me it was far from a pleasant experience. Fulton let out a breath of relief and proceeded to just lay down fully on the floor. Zali shot him a glance before commenting, "Plus told you that was a bad idea." Plus. I sighed. This meeting had started on the wrong foot but was still salvageable, and going forward I will need to treat my future interactions with psychers very carefully. Plus, let us start again. I recently lost most of my memory. Would either of you kindly brief me on the perils of the warp and teach me the knowledge of self-protection when using psychic powers? Plus. Just then, my mind registered a flurry of encrypted Vox messages received by the fortress from the front line. Things were happening and we had little time to lose. There was a weird tension in the air. I was not sure if that was because of my awkward initial interactions with the Psychers or the looming rebel offensive that might be happening soon. Apparently, they had never met a Psyker who can go on and off at will, and me going psychic active so close to Fulton with my level of power had triggered distressing memories of a past experience he had with some warp entity in a previous mission where he almost lost his life. He confessed the very similar feeling of being severely outmatched had triggered his out-of-control outburst. While that was not a valid excuse for him to lose control, I assured the Psyker this matter will not be pursued further by me in the future. After receiving Fulton's profuse apologies, we went forward with the crash course. We proceeded smoothly on the lessons, silently agreeing to ignore the puddle of spilt decaf that served as a stark reminder of a disastrous close call. Just as things were going into high gear, my crash course with the duo Psychers came to an abrupt end when Thaberus interrupted the session with breaking news from the front. It seemed like the rebels would be starting their full offensive soon and I would need to prepare for departure to the front lines immediately. My presence at the front line had become necessary as Creedtopher had calculated that my tweaking of the plan had made the data load required increase 20-fold, so he had rushed to build a device in close proximity to the front line that was needed to cut down the margin of errors. I already knew this was coming as a part of my consciousness was still connected to the fortress machine spirit and the spike of traffic in encrypted Vox messages did not go unnoticed. That said, I did benefit greatly from the brief interaction with the Psychers. First, I had accidentally mastered the conjuration of my halo during the second activation. The halo was one way to radiate my psychic might and it had so far proved useful to strike either reverence or fear into the Emperor's subjects. Second, I finally understood the basic concept of self-protection from the perils of the warp. The fundamental outline was quite simple. Think of the warp as the sea and warp users as the swimmers. A normal swim in shallow waters would normally be quite safe and the chances of being eaten by a predator almost non-existent, except in this case sometimes the sea could come to you, so one needed to be perceptive to the currents. Then there were the other considerations like the mental fortitude of each individual when assessing the risk of warp taint while using psychic powers, but we simply do not have the time to dwell into the details today. When I had free time, more lessons would definitely be needed on this subject matter. I was on my way to my room for another change of clothes, one aimed to impress and hopefully help in getting the full cooperation from the governor's faction to make our grand trap successful. To that end, I had enlisted the help of Sister Dialogus Wellmanor on that front since I had always been a fashion idiot. Wellmanor had stayed behind as a liaison for the sororitas as she was not of the militant order. I had her waiting for me at my room via Vox as I sped across the fortress' massive walkway. Halfway through my journey, I had a distinct feeling of being watched. Curious, I slowed down and noticed a security picked feed, a term they used for cameras here, was aimed at me. I let my mind sink deeper into the fortress network and confirmed my hunch. At the same time my consciousness had reported to me there was another picked feed looking at the control room which controlled the picked feed looking at me. So they even had a watcher watching the watchers. That's the Imperium for you. I tagged my mind into said picked feed and a view popped into my vision showing a dimly lit room where two people were looking at a monitor. On its screen was yours truly focused close up. The audio was also connected. Is that the mystery guest? One man asked. I think so. All sorts of important people were flying in just to see her. Who do you think she is? The other man asked back. Throne knows, that knowledge is beyond our clearance, shrugged the first man, but she sure looks pretty. Wait, is she looking at the picked feed? I had their attention and might as well use this convenient chance to test something. So I smiled, then instantly activated my halo and cranked it to maximum intensity. The two men in my overlapped vision panicked, moved back from the monitor, tripped over each other and fell over in comedic fashion. Hilarious as it was, the brief testing of my halo effect seemed to indicate it could somehow permeate through live-picked feeds, but its effectiveness remained inconclusive. How this was achieved was totally beyond me, but the Grimdark universe was a place where scrap codes that transmit warp-infested computer viruses exist, so the underlying principles might be the same. That my halo, like the Emperor's, which might be essentially a type of positively charged warp energy emitter that could work through live-picked feeds, might not be that far-fetched of a concept after all. At any rate, It felt like a bad idea to leave a record of the incident, so I had my consciousness reach into the database of the fortress and erase the records on both ends. As I did so, I wondered how all this was achieved, as the computation happening in the back end must be enormous. I looked down at my hands and remembered all Primarchs were sentient weapons masquerading as semi-humans. Since that much was true, the same must be said of SYRINE. The fact that my consciousness now resided in such a body had implications that I had neither the time nor the will to deal with at the moment, so I shook off that uneasy feeling and hurried to my room. Sister Wellmana was already waiting at the door of my room when I reached it. My senses detected her breathing quickened as I approached. Nervousness, anticipation, reverence, somehow I could read her emotions like an open book, and it felt strange. Rarely if ever had I evoked such emotions amongst other people back on Earth. Of course, if our position was flipped and I was back to my old self, I would probably be a sweaty mess if a little demi-goddess approached me in private. She was about to bow when I raised my hand to stop her. "Be at ease, sister. It was I who requested your assistance." She bowed anyway. "I am at your service, Lady SYRINE." Lady again, huh? This stiffness was suffocating, so I decided to see how much boundaries could be pushed. "Wellmana, you will be my teacher for the things I will be asking you. As such, I permit you to address me without honorifics in private. Just call me SYRINE." "But..." She raised her head with a horrified expression, but war was waiting, so I just took her hand and opened the door. Soon we were rummaging through SYRINE's glorious collection of clothes together. Wellmana's face lightened up considerably, looking at the otherworldly garments befitting an imperial heiress of a galactic empire. Now that I got a closer look at her, she was actually quite cute beneath all that scholar outfit, so I could not resist and dropped a tease. "See anything you like? Looking at you, I believe our size is compatible. How about I let you choose one to keep as a gift after this war is over?" Wellmana did not dare to reply, but the look of her horrified face again was well worth it. I avoided anything heavy or gaudy, and we quickly settled on a simple yet regal outfit for the occasion. A quick change later, we were in front of the large mirror in the bedroom. I looked into the reflection and wondered if I looked fitting for one who would be sending more than 500,000 souls to a risky gambit. One last thing before we would be ready. "Wellmana, please teach me how to perform the proper greetings for high society in this world." Slightly stunned by my request but quickly coming to her senses, Wellmana performed the gesture in front of me. As expected of a proper scholar, her greeting looked flawless. The whole greeting gesture was a mixture of an old-fashioned curtsy, which then progressed to the Aquila hand sign that was only performed by female members of high society on the planet. I committed her gesture to memory and tried performing it in front of Wellmana. "Let me see. Lower my head slightly, hold up the edge of the outer gape, extend my right foot behind the left, slightly bend the knees and then bring myself up, proceed to do the Aquila hand sign and raise my head." Too easy. The level of precision provided by this body had made such a sequence of actions too easy. "Am I doing it correctly?" I asked. "Perfectly done." Wellmana was looking at me with sparkling eyes behind her goggles. "May I ask why would you go that far to show respect?" Her question prompted me to take a closer look at the scholar. Was she serious? Did she truly believe just because I had SYRINE's credentials that people would willingly do whatever I say, or was this a thing in this universe? Or had I reached the age to throw out random wisdom? Being a member of the Sororitas, which was an organization of zealots, might have skewed her point of view on these matters. "It is simple," I answered. "Paying respect is free, and I believe it should always be paid whenever appropriate." It was not as if I was a typical 8 feet tall Primarch with a legion of super soldiers numbering hundreds of thousands under my command. If that was the case, etiquette would literally be optional when dealing with the normal folks. I had to play to my strength to increase my odds of long-term survival going forward. We finished up and proceeded to the landing pad where Flame Raven was waiting. "Wellmana will be riding with me on a gunship for this trip to the front." The Externus sun had just broken through the horizon, and the morning wind made the scholar shiver as we approached the downed rear hatch of the flying fortress. I was curious as to why Wellmana was shivering when the temperature felt just fine before a shocking realization hit me. All this while, I had been interacting with this world with the body of a super-level transhuman and had been taking a lot of things for granted. My mind was racing back to some of the minor details that happened since coming to this world, like back in the inner sanctum when I was able to easily push Alicia off me despite her being suited up in power armor, and how the nameless sword was lighter than it seemed. So all that was because of my Primarch level of physiology? Am I losing my sense of humanity without even realizing it? Lady SYRINE? Wilmina's concerned voice woke me up from my stupor. I had stopped walking and she dared not walk in front of me. I looked at the scholar again and found her still shaking in the morning breeze. You are freezing, let's get inside, I said and hastened my steps. Thaberus was waiting at the rear hatch entrance. The tail ends of purity seals plastered on his shoulder pad were fluttering in the wind. Now that I think about it, that armored capoton of his must be weighing like a helmet in a normal human's hand. Beside the Inquisitor was Rantor, the friendly stormtrooper. He was enjoying Ilhostub, its glowing ember end shining with the same intensity as the laser rangefinder optic of his Hashot volley gun. Good morning, Mr. Rantor. While walking towards the gunship I greeted the big guy who I had not seen for a whole day. Morning there, little miss. You are looking mighty fine today, he said while putting out his low stub and stepping aside to let us through. Thaberus shot his retinue a side glance, took out a data slate and accessed something on it. He then passed the data slate to the henchman before dropping a comment. Rantor, I hereby permit you to read this document. Go through with it and update your etiquette when dealing with SYRINE effective immediately. Return this to me later. A puzzled Rantor took the data slate and started reading while Thaberus greeted us with a nod. SYRINE, sister, follow me. As Wilmina and I followed the Inquisitor entering the gunship, behind us came the surprised gasp of Rantor. I was greeted by the distinct smell of Flame Raven's interior again. It was a sort of mix between an expensive car and an airline cabin. My mind could not help but think back on all the recent happenings. Everything felt like a lifetime ago and the hardest day was still ahead. I reached out to greet the gunship's machine spirit. Flame Raven, how are you? Fully operational and ready to serve, Authority. Being the Authority, I might need to get used to that concept soon.